This is Me, I Am Mental, the podcast. A quick disclaimer. The content you find here is neither intended to be therapy or diagnosis. It is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only.
Stigma. Mm-hmm. That's one. You mentioned it, and it occurred to me that that's a critical like topic we need to maybe just touch on with regard to cancer. I think stigma is still a big challenge.
It's a huge problem.
What is the experience like?
As I told you, for myself, I lost a lot of friends, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. You have cases where culturally we have certain beliefs. Number one, cancer is a curse. Your family is cursed. You've done something bad and God is punishing you. Children don't get cancer. That must be a curse. And then it comes all the way down to some of our parents have come and told us, even when we go back home, people don't want to hang out with us. They even tell their kids, don't play with that child, he has cancer. Maybe they think it's transmissible because they don't understand it. There's not enough awareness out there about cancer. But our children will be so isolated, even from their own siblings. Because now the siblings also now reach that point, especially when they're younger. You're always getting their attention. All the money is going to you. I've even stopped going to school because we're paying their bills. So there's also that, that kind of animosity or separation. So it's not just the child who goes through the stigma, it's the whole family. Sometimes they're completely isolated from their community. As I told you, sometimes the fathers even abandon the wives and the kids who have cancer. So there's a lot to be talked about. Cancer is like any other disease. You go into the hospital, you get your treatment. Cancer is not a death sentence. If it's caught early, chances of survival are very high.
I have a question. This has come up since I moved to Kenya and first started visiting 10 years ago. When you're in the health space and learning about disease and disease prevention, the issue of stigma always seems to come up. And then also the next part you told about just because of the lack of information that we may think this seems so unreal, it must be a curse or some sort of bad luck or some sort of hexing or whatever. Yeah. Those stories always pop up. Mm-hmm. But I never get a sense for the prevalence of that belief, because it's an anecdote that's easy to share and sticks in our minds, but I don't know how much weight to give it. If you could give it a percentage of people who would begin to think that way. Is it a lot of people, half the people?
I can't quite give a percentage, but because we primarily deal from people from low-income backgrounds, these are people mainly who are from rural areas. Mm-hmm. And it's not even just about it could be a curse. It could be the pastor telling them, forget about that, come, let's pray for you, and your child will be healed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people out there who don't have information. Mm-hmm. You come to the big towns, the Nairobis, the Kisumus, the Eldorets, people are more informed. But out there in the villages where, a lot of our people come from, there's not enough information out there. Mm-hmm. About diseases like cancer. Now HIV and AIDS is not, you say it and people don't even flinch. Right. Because they know you can get your free ARVs and, so we need to create more awareness.
And in some ways, HIV AIDS has probably also gone through that cycle where initially it was treated with that same, yes. But now many people can associate it as just being a viral infection, yes. And it's managed like this. So there isn't too much of that, that smoke and mirrors thing going on with HIV/AIDS. But I don't know whether what you were alluding to with your question was that maybe it would be nice maybe to have something like a scientific study conducted to see around this thing. Is that what you're saying?
The anecdote always comes up, and I'm always wondering if that is like the one anecdote that everyone remembers because it's so extreme, or if it really is a common thought. How common is this thought?
It's very common.
You would say very common.
In terms of cancer is a curse, in terms of you've done something bad and God is punishing you, in terms of a lot of people just don't believe that kids get cancer. So when they have this thing, this huge growth, and they're not understanding what it is. Even if you try to explain to them, they don't know what is cancer. Kids don't get cancer.
Lack of knowledge around the subject is one thing. I just wonder, is it actually coming from the pulpit, or is it just amongst those who are generally spiritually minded people? I mean, there's not a pastor actually saying this, is there?
It's not necessarily linked to the spiritual thing, because as I said, I mean, people will say it's a curse. Cancer is a curse, and that's what in their particular village they've been told for years and years and years. There was no cancer; it was just a curse. They don't even know cancer.
So when something happens to you, and they have no explanation that is logical to them, because of the mystery of it, they'll assume you're cursed. It's a bit like, the way some psychological conditions, including, or even conditions like epilepsy, some people were thought to, that's your demon possessed because you're epileptic, because they don't have another way of explaining that to themselves. So anything they don't understand, they would assign it one of those.
And what I guess I'm getting to is it can be a barrier to getting the help that's needed.
Yes.
Because of the prevalence of that belief.
Exactly.
And then once it is diagnosed properly within the healthcare system, but then you have what would be a support system back
then
at
you
home
go back
that
and
isn't a
it's
support
still
system. They still have that.
Exactly.
It's very
It
difficult.
can be very difficult, isn't it?
Is Hope for Cancer Kids, is this a Nairobi-based organization? I mean, is it mostly operating here as well?
We operate from Nairobi primarily, but we deal, in the public health system. If you're at the point of diagnosis, you can only be properly diagnosed and treated comprehensively at a level 6 hospital. For the longest time in the public space, the only 2 hospitals that were doing that were Kenyatta National Hospital, our biggest referral hospital, and Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret. So at any point in time, anyone with a cancer diagnosis is referred to one of those 2 hospitals. So the children we support are from all over the country. We work with kids from Kisumu, Isiolo, Mombasa, Turkana, Marsabit, Nyeri. But at one point, they will end up in that system, either at Kenyatta National Hospital or Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, because those are the only public spaces where you can actually get comprehensive treatment and quality treatment with NHIF without having to go too much out of pocket.
Now that we're on the subject of Hope for Cancer Kids, just tell us what exactly when was it set up? Who set it up? What were the objectives? What's been the journey like? Challenges? But we will discuss them. But generally, we wanted to get a better idea of
who we are and what we do.
And what you do.
Hope for Cancer Kids initially was started as a support group. For people who had kids at Kenyatta National Hospital who had cancer. So there was this one father, and he said, you know what, we need to do something about this. His daughter had cancer. And so he got together a group of people, and they started meeting regularly. And it was just, let's talk about our issues, what's going on with you guys. I went through this. What did you go through? How did you deal with that? Eventually, they started realizing that there are so many needs that they had that were similar. And if one person goes to complain to the hospital, there's not that much that will be done. But if you go as a group, then you have more clout. Unfortunately, his daughter died. And he just couldn't take it. And he didn't want anything to do with anything cancer. He even left the country and he's never come back. Luckily, there was a group of people at the hospital, mainly a lot of people on the care team, some doctors and nurses here and there, who decided to formalize it because they saw the impact that it was having. And they formalized it. It was registered in 2008 as a civil society. And from then they started supporting children primarily through provision of NHIF, because one of the biggest barriers to treatment is the cost of cancer treatment, because it's ridiculous. So primarily what we do, in 2008, they were supporting about 16 kids per month with NHIF support. So we work with the nurses in charge in the hospitals, and they tell us these are the children who've been diagnosed. These ones come from very poor backgrounds. They can't even afford that NHIF. So those are the cases we take on. As of last month, I think we had about 470 kids on an NHIF list. So primarily, we provide access to treatment through NHIF, because then with NHIF they can access treatment in public hospitals. Another thing we do is psychosocial support, primarily for the children. I talked about the art therapy classes that we have with the kids. And sometimes you find that the kids just put their feelings on paper. You'll go in and you'll be maybe, for example, painting, and they'll make 3 or 4 paintings, and they'll keep one and they say, I don't even want to see those ones, throw them away. So it's almost like they're kind of
catharsis.
Letting out their frustrations and their stresses. We are also involved in awareness creation, and we do a lot of advocacy. We are represented on various technical working groups of the National Cancer Control Program. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. Where we are now, we are at a point where we are starting to say, okay, fine, you've provided an NHIF. This person is coming from Marsabit. They don't have transport to get to Nairobi. When they get to Nairobi, they don't even know. You drop them at Kenyatta Hospital and they're lost. So there's the issue of navigation through the system. We're also realizing sometimes you're here in Nairobi for an outpatient procedure. Maybe it's a follow-up. You're here in Nairobi for 3 days, or a 30-day radiotherapy cycle. NHIF is not going to cover your accommodation or your food, so they abandon treatment. Actually, their treatment abandonment rate is about 54%.
Wow,
because of issues such as transport, accommodation. Sometimes it's even just diagnostics which are not covered by NHIF. You need to get that scan before you can do your treatment, or the medicine is not available in the hospital, there's a stock out, you have to buy it from a pharmacy. I don't have that money. So where we are evolving to now is a space where actually next month we are hoping to launch our first accommodation center, so that when these kids are told you need to be in Kenyatta National Hospital for a 30-day radiotherapy cycle, instead of the parents saying, let me go sell some cows, or let me go look for money, or just giving up because they've reached their end, they are not worried about that. They have transport, they'll get to Nairobi, they'll get transport to and from the hospital, and they have a safe place to stay, and they have a meal, a warm meal. So that is where we are going at the moment. That's a big project for this year, the accommodation center. But ideally, tied to that is our support groups, because since COVID, we haven't really kicked off our support groups. They haven't gone back to what they used to be. So at least within that space, we'll have a place where we can sit down with the parents, find out what they're going through, what challenges they're having, how can we support them, whether it's psychological support, whether it's capacity building, coping mechanisms, how to run a business, any skills that they would need once they finish, their treatment, or while they're going through their treatment. So we'll be able to take care of both their mental and their medical needs in that sense.
Okay. And so for the time being, you're still largely Nairobi based. The center is still going to be based in Nairobi.
Yes.
Moi Teaching also has cancer treatment facilities.
Yes.
Are you also looking potentially to grow into that space as well? Or
at the moment, we are actually supporting a lot of children at MTRH, but primarily with
remotely
NHIF.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because those are the only 2 places that have, for example, radiotherapy machines. So even if you go for chemo somewhere else, you'll still have to come to one of those 2 institutions.
There's a lot of benefits to having the housing. I mean, that's an opportunity to have mental health
yes,
counseling on site.
Exactly.
that's a great opportunity to make that just sort of streamlined. Is that part of the plan?
That is definitely part of the plan, because even if you have get a psychologist and take them to Kenya National Hospital on clinic days,
Yeah.
how much time will you have with everybody?
Yeah.
But if we have our own space and they are there for maybe 3 days or a week or maybe 3 weeks, you can sit down and have someone in the home just talk them through some of the things that they're going through. So that is definitely one of the plans. And in terms of Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, they actually have a facility nearby that provides accommodation for the children for free when they go for treatment there.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So
Okay.
the need wasn't so big there. That's why we decided to start in Nairobi.
And
Yes.
yeah. Okay. Now I'm glad that there's something like that already in place in Eldoret.
Have you ever found yourself in a position to actually be in a support group for a specific person?
To be in a support group.
Yeah. Now that you've gone through it, I mean, when they form a support group, they ever say, "Hey, Sidney, can you?"
Yes, I have actually. Initially, right after I finished my treatment, a lot of people started calling me and saying, "Oh, I have a cousin who has cancer. I have an uncle who has cancer. My dad has cancer. Can you just come talk to them?"
Mm-hmm.
And initially, it was a bit uncomfortable for me, unpacking all this stuff that I've been through to a complete stranger. But because it's someone who's going through something, maybe not exactly what I went through, but it was cancer. So there are some similarities in our stories.
Right.
And I started talking to people. And for a long time, I didn't really know what impact I was having. Until about a year later, when some girl called me, she was a friend of mine, and she had asked me to go and talk to, I think it was her uncle or her father, I can't remember. And I had gone to talk to him, and we started talking, and, I went 2-3 times. Then, I would call him up on the phone, "How are you doing? What's going on?" And eventually he passed on. But she called me a year after, actually, he passed on. And she said, "You know what? I don't know what you did for him. I don't know what you told him. Even though, he didn't make it, from the time you started talking to him, his outlook on life just changed. Like, he became a different person. He had lost himself. He was not, communicating with anyone. He was just in his own little world. And he was, according to them, depressed." So she said, just the fact that you came and talked to him, and, you kept talking to him, you kept checking on him, and because you could relate on that level, it made such a big difference in him. Like, it's like you turned on a light that had been switched off.
Well, I can imagine anyone who's a head of household, it's got to be a completely different direction in terms of seeking support and getting support, as opposed to a child, or as opposed to someone who's the young, the last born. To make that step and reach out to someone, a guy who's unlikely to actually do it on his own behalf, could really be life changing.
There's a problem with us men. I don't know what it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of why Charles and I started the podcast, is because it's like there needs to be more guys discussing stuff.
Because at the end of the day, a lot of guys bottle up a lot of stuff, and you'll find it manifesting in other ways. Either they start drinking a lot, or their behavior just changes completely, because they don't feel like, as a man, you should be strong. You should, that's how we are brought up. Be strong, don't cry, deal with your issues. So that's the psyche that we come up with. So even when it comes to health-seeking behavior, I'll wait until I'm dying before, you'll have to drag me to the hospital. And that's how a lot of, especially, our fathers, and that generation, and our uncles, things are starting to change now.
A bit,
It's okay for men to cry nowadays, though we still want to do it in public.
Right. And even if you have, like, when the whirlwind of all the stress and mental health is attacking you, and you're going from phase to phase of wanting to be isolated and wanting to be surrounded by people, or lashing out, etc. Even if you do have some amount of regret or realize that maybe last week I wasn't my best self, it might even be hard to articulate that to your loved ones.
Yes.
So it's like we don't even have the resources to seek forgiveness or acknowledge our difficulties even when we're past our difficulties to mend,
Yeah.
there's just a lot of privacy built into it.
Yeah.
And so, do you actually recommend reaching out to people who aren't asking for help in this situation?
It's a tough one. Yes and no.
Okay.
You reach out to some people and they just won't want your help. Because the minute they kind of admit that they need help is when they admit that they have all these issues that they need to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people say, no, it's okay, I'm fine. And especially with guys, the more you try and push them into something, the further away they'll run from it. So maybe, but there is definitely the need for these people to deal with their issues, their mental issues. So I'm not sure what mechanism would be best to bring these people together. Because even for men, it's very rare to find a prostate cancer support group. Because guys don't like.
Yeah, we did as Rotary.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2 or 3 years ago we
Yes.
had a bike-a-thon that was supposed to raise awareness and funds to support that was breast and prostate. I
Mhm.
think we were targeting those.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm wrong. It was cervical and prostate.
Mhm.
I think for the reason that they're prevalent,
Mhm. Yeah.
and also that there is also through screening and such
Mhm.
things, you can catch them early and,
Yes.
and mitigate and sometimes treat successfully.
Mm.
So we focused our attention on those two, and we did a run, like some sort of sensitization run for nearly 6 months. A lot of
Mhm.
posters, conversations. I remember we even held this panel discussion. But in all cases, men were underrepresented.
Mhm.
I remember there's a gentleman from Faraja
Yes.
who is also trying to champion this, the awareness and also great support for men with prostate cancer. And he says even there, just getting guys to show up and participate
Mhm.
is a bit of a challenge. And I think it might remain a challenge for a long time because of just how men approach this. But it makes me go back to your own experience, what you were telling us about how you were trying at the very beginning when this information was relayed to you, how you were trying to process it, and you still wanting to play the role of being the pillar.
Mhm.
So you acknowledge you are in this challenging position, but you still are unable to relinquish your role as the person who people rely on for order and clarity and to hold. And so you're always trying to hold yourself together,
Yeah.
So I think that still presents men with a big challenge. The other thing we have discussed here in the past, Darren, is many men also, we don't seem to have a very extensive and rich vocabulary for our feelings
Yes.
because we don't pay too much attention to them. So we have a lot of understanding of a lot of things happening externally. We can talk
Mhm.
about electricity and what happens. But when it comes to the inner landscape, we have no language for what we feel, and we don't even necessarily try to track what's going on.
Yes.
So that still makes it challenging for us to seek help. And when somebody comes to try to help us, we think they're invading our space.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That is true. And as men, we tend to compartmentalize
Yes.
things.
Yes.
It's a
We'll
a
put it in a
skill.
box.
Yeah.
Put it in a box and we close the box. And until it's about to explode. And that's when we go back and, okay, now I need to deal with this.
Yeah. Okay. So I wanted you to just, in this whole thing, I wanted to see whether you'd be able to highlight for us some classic mental health challenges
Mhm.
that are associated with having cancer.
Okay.
Like things which are cross-cutting that always come up. And maybe in that sense, you can highlight like what they were for you,
Mhm.
but possibly also when you look at the children, you look at the parents, you look
Mhm.
at what are the things, mental health challenges that keep coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, they say that cancer pushes a family from a state of poverty to a state of extreme poverty. So it's very expensive. Even if you have an HIV, diagnoses are not covered, all these things. So there's always that, where am I going to
Stress.
get the money to pay for
Financial
this,
stress.
to get the best treatment? So already a family has moved from being a two-income family to a one-income family. Because most likely, a lot of the time, the mother becomes the primary caregiver and the father continues taking care of the family. And what about single mothers or single fathers? That's a story for another day.
Yeah.
But there's the financial aspect. I'm stressed. I'm already struggling to pay my rent and put food on the table. Now I have to deal with cancer. Do I keep paying for this cancer treatment, or do I feed the other 5 kids in the house? That's one of the mental issues, the financial aspect. Secondly is my child has this thing and they're going to die. That's what a lot of people think at first. How do we deal with it? As a parent, as the child themselves, everyone else is going to school, I'm not going to school, I'm just in the hospital, I never see my siblings, Daddy only comes to see me once a year. In fact, when we went back to the hospital after COVID, some of the kids were so happy. They're like, we're so happy you guys came back. No one has visited us in a whole year. Like, you've seen nobody except the other kids in the ward and the nurses and the doctors.
Oh.
So there's that psychological, and especially at a younger age, there's that sense of belonging is very important.
Mm.
You want to belong to a family or a community or a soccer team or, but everything that defined your life at that point, you have been isolated from it. So who are you as a person? Some of the things that are scary, even as a survivor, as I said, 18 years of being cancer-free, but I still have to do my checks every year. Between the time you take those tests and the time the doctor tells you you're fine, there's a whole thing you're dealing with in your mind.
It's like a loaded gun is pointing at you.
Yes. Some people have retinoblastoma, cancer of the eye. They lose their eye. They need to get a glass eye. Some people, their legs or their limbs will get cut off, or certain parts of their body will be removed. Some women will lose their cervix. A lot of men, exposure to radiation has a big effect on fertility. So I remember being told, you might not be able to have kids. But at that point, I was 19. I'm like, those are not things I'm worried about now. In hindsight, I'm thinking now, luckily I have 2 beautiful daughters now. But there's that thing of, what is a man in society? What is your role traditionally? So who am I if I don't have the ability? Which woman is going to love me? Right now, I had because of long-term exposure to radiation, I lost a significant amount of hearing. So I have to wear hearing aids now on both sides. They say eventually my hearing is going to deteriorate completely. Dealing with that, it's not something that I would say is easy, but I'm like, you know what? I'm here. I'm living my life. If it comes to that point, we'll deal with it. I've started, trying to get into sign language and see, but I remember even when I lost my hearing, it was very depressing before I got my hearing aid because it took about 6 months to come. And I couldn't communicate with my daughter. I couldn't communicate with my wife. And it was very concerning, but it's something that is always there in the back of your mind. What's going on with me? Who am I if I don't have my hearing? Who am I if I don't have my leg? What am I going to do if I can't get a job? I remember being fired because I'd gotten a really good job, and that's the time I lost my hearing. And then because, I was in the middle of induction, but they didn't confirm me because, I wasn't able to perform. So there are so many mental aspects of cancer, and also just dealing with the community, dealing with people, because people tend to look at you differently. Whether it's in the rural area where you're stigmatized because there's something wrong with those guys, don't play with those kids, don't do that. What is that doing to your child? But also, for some of us, it's you feel like your life has just stopped. Everyone else is going on with their life, Even my family, as much as they were suffering with me, they were going to work, they were going to school, they were continuing their life. So I was there and I was isolated. So I think the biggest thing that stands out for me about cancer is it's very isolating. And unless you have a strong mental foundation, it's very hard to deal with some of these things. I don't know if I quite answered your question.
Yes, you have.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's a list of things.
It's a list of things that's quite weighty, actually.
And it just demonstrates that the need for support is so multifaceted, and it in a sense, when we look at the topic of today's discussion, it seems so dire because, I don't know, it seems like cancer is associated with death. It's not associated with longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think of it as big, extreme, and everything. And at the same time, the ways the stresses manifest themselves are not unlike almost every other kind of stress.
Mm.
And every other, the kind of, it would be wise for us to think in terms of what we would do to remain healthy in this situation before the situation occurs, because we're all going to die, and so we will be faced with death or amongst our family members or ourselves at some point. And so confronting this as an extreme probably isn't wise to confront it as an extreme. It's life. It's part of what we all go through. We're all going to go through something. I remember when I began working with our organization for people with disabilities, one of my advisors said, don't think of us, because he was also someone living with a disability, don't think of us as other, because everyone's joining this team eventually. Everyone will walk with a cane, or they will lose their eyesight, or they'll lose their hearing. We're all joining team disability at some point. So let's think about it now, and think about the people who might be young and who are experiencing it at a younger age as one of us. And so in the same way, I think it would be wise for us to go through the mental steps of how would I feel if I had, some people even call it the C word instead of calling it cancer, because they're just afraid. And so confronting this fear now, and confronting it with people, and remembering to be one of the persons that reaches out and stays in someone's life. The fact that it would be isolating is such a shame.
Yes.
And it's only isolating because the people who maybe some of those people who were friends became acquaintances because of fear. Maybe they actually were friends, but were so unable to process it that they became acquaintances, and maybe they regret.
Actually, that's a couple of people later on reached out and were like, I didn't come to you because I just didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
Or, sometimes, even when you go and visit someone who has lost a loved one,
Yes.
you don't want to start saying it'll be well,
everything sounds
strong.
right.
You don't know what to say sometimes. So a lot of people told me that I honestly didn't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to come and tell you because I had no words. And even as you're on the topic of death, what happens at that point when you're told, okay, we've done everything we can do, but it's not looking good.
Mm-hmm.
How do you prepare, even an adult, for that period? How do you prepare somebody to go back home? There was a discussion. One patient, one time, the child was not doing well, and they had that conversation with the hospital. And some of the conversations they were having were, it'll be easier for the child to go home when they were alive, so you'd rather discharge them, and you get them home, it'll be cheaper and it'll be easier, as opposed to if anything happens and the child dies, And now you have to start talking about permits and coffins and all those things and taking them home. And I think they're from a Muslim community, so for them it's a 24-hour thing.
The pressure gets incredible.
So some of these conversations you're having, and you're talking about your child who's still alive, but you're talking about your child who's gonna die. It's like they're already gone. So there's so many aspects of it, and there are so many things you see every day. But
like in that case, somebody starts grieving. The person is alive, but you have to start grieving in a way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to be very practical.
Yes.
About dealing with life issues, like logistics. How do we manage this process?
What do you even tell the child?
Would
tell
you
them
tell-
you're taking you home
yes.
to die. I mean,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I'm going to flip that question and ask: are there anything you would say through the process you have gained as a person, mentally, positive aspects, things that have come out of this that are positive?
I tell everyone that I wouldn't be who I am today if I had not gone through cancer. If I hadn't passed through that, I wouldn't be the me that I am now. I remember when I was doing my radiotherapy, and at some point I just used to complain, going to the hospital every day, it's making me sick, I don't feel like going. And one day I was sitting there waiting for, my session. And there were these two Muslim ladies and a small girl that were always there. And obviously they had hijabs, so I assumed, of course, it must be one of the old ladies who's, going through treatment. And then one day the little girl, she was always jumping and, ball of energy, kids. She must have been about 6 or 7. One day she removed her hijab and she had, a tube in her throat. And apparently she'd been, she was living in the hospital. She would just come down for her sessions and go straight back up. So for her, it was like, I'm free now. I'm not in the room. So she would get so excited when she's going for radiotherapy. But I looked at that girl and I said, okay, what am I complaining about? If this child has all that joy. So there's that resilience that it can give you. It also sometimes, will bring out, once you've been through, the bad times or the worst, and you've kind of found that leg to stand on, I believe it actually makes you stronger as a person. It completely changes your outlook on life. You start appreciating things that
you would
even drinking water, drinking water, just drinking water. I remember it was so painful at some point that I used to suppress my yawns. Like, when I'm yawning, because of where it is, it was really painful. So I started suppressing them until it reached a point where even after treatment, every time I would yawn, there was a click because, but that resilience and just that power of, I can do this. Nothing is going to stop me. We've been climbing mountains with a bunch of cancer survivors, and survivorship for me starts at the point of diagnosis. We've had 60-year-old grandmothers. We've had people who are having breast cancer treatment. We've had people who have finished their treatment. We've climbed Mount Kenya twice. We've climbed Kilimanjaro once. So there's no limit to what somebody can do or what you can achieve. Regardless of the outcome, you can still either choose to look at it from the victim mentality or from what can I get out of this, or what am I meant to learn through this. And I guess depending on where you're at mentally, it can actually make you or break you. So for me, I actually think that I'm a better person now. I feel like I'm more grounded. I feel like I'm doing actually what I'm meant to be doing. Like I've found my calling, I've found my purpose. And I'm very fulfilled. So I think for me, cancer was, yes, it was tough. But from the beginning, I think I just made that resolve that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to beat it. And that's how I live my life. Nothing can stop me. I've been through cancer. What do you mean?
I know, right?
What's going to stop me now?
Okay.
Yeah, you don't run into traffic, but there is the resilience. What can stop you now, really? Yeah.
What can?
I'm saying.
My wife?
Yeah. No. There might have been some miscommunication there, but the punchline still hit pretty hard. No, those are amazing lessons to draw forward, and I mean, you've built in resilience as a result, and it's really beautiful.
So as we draw this to a close, we do need to find out, is there any way at all anybody who's going to watch this view or listen in can provide some support to Hope for Cancer Kids?
Where can we find out more about the organization?
And then what type of support, isn't it? And
that's a great question. We need a lot of support. You can't do anything alone. You can't work in a silo. And it's a whole system. Hope for Cancer Kids, we obviously need financial support to pay for some of the services that we provide, whether it's NHIF or transport or what have you. We also need people who are willing to volunteer with us. For example, our art therapy classes. We go there every Thursday, and we're actually looking to expand to other wards and other hospitals. And we need people who can, be part of that team, going in, playing with the kids, putting a smile on their face. And by the way, once you do it, and you realize why, and you fall in love with those kids. So we are always looking for volunteers for our programs. Financial support, we are always looking for in-kind support, whether it's donating food items or care packages that have things like toothbrushes. These are people who have come from nowhere and they don't have much. So we usually give them care packages when they start, when we onboard them. So one way you can reach us is by sending an email. That is info@hope4cancerkids.org. We do have a website, www.hopeforcancerkids.org. We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram. You can always find us and reach out to us through those platforms, and then we can figure out where it is that you would like you see yourself fitting in. Whether it's volunteering your time, whether it's volunteering your sending donations, monetary or in kind. We're always looking for other things, for example, legal services, and we might not have someone legal on our board.
He just gave me the
sometimes we just need that skill. Maybe we're having this issue, or we don't know how to deal with this thing. We might need someone to come and just help us out and figure out our legal challenges. Or we might need someone who is investments to help us to manage our money, or even an auditor to come and audit us. So anything that someone would be able to do in kind or at discounted rates or pro bono, because at the end of the day, the need is big. I'm sure by the first quarter of this year, by the time that's over, we'll be supporting 500 kids per month just from NHIF. And then there's all the other programs. So the need is there. So anyone who wants to get in touch can just get in touch with us and kind of get to know us a little bit more, then see where you'd plug in best.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Also, are there any sort of final words you would want to share regarding general support for cancer patients? Anybody who is watching or listening,
What I would like to say, number one, is cancer is not a death sentence. And I'm living proof of that. If it is caught early and you have access to treatment, you can beat cancer. And those are some of the gaps we're trying to bridge in the healthcare system. So that, in fact, what I'm trying to do is give every child out there the same chance that I had at beating cancer. Aside from that, if you know someone who has cancer, or whether it's a relative or a friend, sometimes just being there. You don't even have to say anything. Just go there, sit, drink a cup of tea. If I want to open up to you, I'll open up. But don't now start. I remember at some point it was so bad. Obviously, I'm the baby, I'm the last born, I'm the only boy. I would get up to go to the kitchen to get a glass of water. And the whole house is, is jumped up and they're all racing. No, it's okay, I'll get it for you, I'll get it. Even my dad, I'm like, hey, come on, just treat me like a normal person. And we just want to be treated like, I'm still Sidney. I'm not,
Is he going to remember that I didn't help him get water?
So what I'm getting at is, sometimes you can just ask, how can I help you? Don't assume that, he needs this or he needs this, or if he talks to Naniama, you take him to the pastor. No, just ask, how can I help? How can I be there for you? What can I do for you? Just having that conversation. I know sometimes it's hard. Sometimes people will open up, sometimes they won't. But give them that opportunity to let you know how you can be of help or of assistance. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you. That's been one of the most moving conversations we've ever had on this. On this podcast, at least for me. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, Sidney. And thank you also, Charles, for introducing me to yet another one of your fabulous guests. And it's always a pleasure to be here on the podcast and hear these sort of stories. And I believe that the viewers and the listeners have learned a lot about resilience and about what it means to go through this process, and some of the mental health struggles and the isolation that can come with it, and the fact that it's not just the person who's been diagnosed, but the entire family can also experience some of these traumas associated with it. It's not just the person who's going through the treatments, but also the people who are surrounded who also may need help. And I'd just like to say, I think we can wrap up here, but what just to clarify, it's hopeforcancerkids.org. Is also the number 4 in that one as well?
No, the website is...
It's spelled out completely.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So it's the email is with a...
info at hope number 4 cancerkids.org.
And the website is hope FOR.
Yes.
I think
Cancer
we'll have
Kids.
that in the graphics.
And we'll put that in the information below inside the description of the episode. And then for those of us who are guys who are, a lot of this is for people who may be struggling with these things directly. But I think there's also a message here about those of us who are friends to those who are going through the diagnosis. And I think one of the takeaways for guys, I think, is as we wrap up here, I heard 2 conversations in the last week, and one of them was someone who was going through quite a bit of trauma, and the other person actually just said, I'll just sit here with you and just let them go through what they're going through without trying to help, without trying to give suggestions, or without showing sympathy, just saying, I'm here. That's it. And then another conversation I heard was a couple of professionals where one who had just had someone pass away, it was a guy, and was absolutely defeated. But another person came in and just shared the space and didn't bring it up even once. Just was there playing, making jokes, being themselves, providing levity that had nothing to do with the situation whatsoever, and just allowed there to be not a distraction, but not in a way that was an attempt to distract, but just to be a good friend and be in that space. And I think that as guys and as good friends, we don't have to know the right words to say, and we don't have to be there in a way that is somehow calculated, yeah, absolutely calculated. And it doesn't, you don't have to be there to help with the issue. You just got to be a friend, and you can do that in any way that comes to mind. You don't have to, and of course for guys, you don't have to try to draw them out. Just be available, and sometimes a quick little message will do. So I feel like there's a lot of different things to take away from this episode. It might be worth a re-listen if for those of you who are thoughtful and would like to know more about being the person who's diagnosed and also being the friend to those who are. And so thank you once again for listening to the Me I Mental podcast. It's been a real pleasure. You can find us on all the social medias, but the sort of the central place to find us is at meiammental.me, and there you can find links to our YouTube page as well as our Instagram and Facebook, etc. And you can also find helpful articles and links and things that can help you as a person who is in pursuit of exercising their mental health. And mental health does not always mean that you are sick. Sometimes it means just going to the gym and taking care of that muscle up inside your head as well. And I think also learning how to be there for people who might need also a little bit of help in their mental health, and just being a good friend to those who are struggling. So having said all that, it's meiammental.me. My name is Darren Collins.
And I'm Charles Adede. Thank you so much.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.